Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Harshali Singh and I'm one of the winners of the Write India Season 2 contest. Now we've only been talking about the lockdown and its repercussions, coronavirus, the quarantine, it's everywhere. Truth be told, I enjoyed this time of solitude. Cut off from everyone and everything, staying with my family. And besides the writing I was able to get done, I reflected on all that is really important. Checked my priorities while I did everything that was required and necessary to stay alive and relevant. So, without further delay, let me begin the first part of Chapter 3 of the To Be Continued initiative that has been started by the Times of India group. The story that we shall weave today in 4 parts is called Love of the Deity. Ramendra? Ramendra, why did you give this name to me, Ma? A young, thin boy, barely 17, asked his mother. Because they represent 2 parts of a man. One of Lord Ram, who sacrificed everything for his dharma, and one of Lord Indra, the most powerful of gods. His mother said to the young man, who looked at her inquisitively with a smile. Why do you ask so many questions, Ramendra? Always doubting. You should try and become more like your father. He was already the head priest of the temple at your age. He didn't get there by questioning his faith. And here you are, still struggling, his mother said reproachfully. But isn't questioning the most important skill that humans possess? Without it, wouldn't we be like any animal, blindly following what someone else has said? Ramendra thought, his eyes lowered. Still confused, Ramendra wondered if he should continue or quit before more of his flaws were highlighted. He saw his mother's attention was back at picking the small parijat flowers for his father's daily puja. How can she do this every day without wondering what life holds for her beyond the 4 walls of this house? Does she ever wonder what talents she has beyond cooking and serving, or ever feel cheated out of a productive life of her own? And is giving birth to you and bringing you up to be able to ask these questions less productive than working in an office? A voice in his head questioned, the tone mildly scolding. He turned around, smiling secretly, and walked towards the temple. This was their home, their work, their Karam Bhumi and their Dharam Bhumi, as his father used to say. He quickened his step as he caught sight of his father. Head down, he walked past the hard, questioning gaze of his father, who continued mouthing his morning chants, waking up the gods one by one. The silence of the shadowed inner sanctum of the temple calmed his anxious heart as he leaned against the rock wall, giving himself a moment to breathe. The solitude inside the temple was warmer due to the Akhand Jyot that had been burning since the temple had been built. Here he could lay down his mask for a few moments and enjoy the freedom of just being what he truly was, a tormented soul. Ramendra walked up to the stone face that his father had washed a while back with milk, honey, and a paste of exotic herbs, as was his morning ritual, the Abhishek. He would soon adorn the stones with jewels and sindoor, and clothes in bright colors, readying it to face the hundreds of devotees who thronged the temple for just a glimpse of the Devi, the goddess. I wonder what you think. Are you even in there? Or are you sitting somewhere else and laughing at all of us watching all this madness? He could just about make out the undulations of a face on the stone. How could this be the goddess Shakti, this small stone, he thought for the nth time? And why can't she be Shakti? He heard a clear voice. Expecting the voice, Ramendra turned and looked around the dimly lit cave. I still have not found the answer to that question, Devi, he said, peering into the shadows. Is it because the stone is small? Would it have been better if it had been massive? A Shila, maybe? Would her powers be perceived as more pronounced? She asked. Well, yes. Do you think being small is a disadvantage? When you are faced with several boys much bigger than yourself, baying for your blood, yes, there were several huge monsters baying for my blood when I fought them. The lady smiled. A single woman. Why did the gods not help you? Ramendra, that is their story to tell. But I suppose, well, they might have been making a statement too, she said. He approached the woman dressed in a plain cotton sari. Sitting on the floor, she was eating the prasad his father had placed on the golden altar of the Shakti. She kept popping the walnuts and almonds in her mouth, one after the other, even as Ramendra's gaze followed the arc of the nut from the slender fingers to her mouth. His stomach rumbled with longing as he stood and watched her for a few moments. Would you like some? She asked, holding out her cupped palm filled with the nuts. He knew he shouldn't, but hunger made him nod his head in the affirmative. Take your pick. I can't eat so much, and I don't want sweets anymore. The laddu is too sweet anyway. Your mother has again been generous with the sugar. I shall try and keep them less sweet tomorrow, Devi. Her trilling laughter rang inside the cave, making his hair stand on end. Ramendra had recently started having vivid dreams. Dreams he was too ashamed to put in words. But once seen, he could not unsee them. What bothered him was that Devi knew each thought in his mind, even before the thought manifested in his dreams. Would she know what he had seen while his subconscious played havoc with his mind? He wondered. His eyes touched every part of the cave, scared of looking at her. Why do you shy away? She asked. He couldn't answer. Raymond, it's all right. There is nothing to feel bad about. You are discovering yourself now. These changes, this confusion is to be expected. So you know? He asked. She only smiled. This ends my part of the story, and I'm passing the baton on to Pranshu Pandey, who is another winner of the Right India series. Thank you so much for listening.
Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. I'm Pranshu Pandey and I'm a winner of the season 2 of Right India Challenge. And today I am here to continue the thread woven by Harshali and to take it forward. So let's begin. Just to recap, we were with Raman, who had entered a shrine to find a mysterious woman inside. A woman who knew a secret of Raman's. Who is that woman and what is the secret that she knows about him? Let's find out. So I'll begin. So you know, Raman said, and the Devi only smiled. But how? There's a reason why people pray to me, said the goddess. Reading people's minds is a very small part of my powers. You know it all then, it seems. It did not surprise Raman. He knew it was only a matter of time before she found out. A week, it seemed, had been enough. Raman looked away from her, fidgeting uneasily in the warmth of the sanctum. There was something about the closeness of the stone walls and the smell of the chandan and the ghee which made him feel queasy. Perhaps it was the proximity to truth. The truth that he had been trying to hide from the world and from himself. Was today the day that it all unraveled? There's no point in running away from yourself, said Devi. She broke one of the laddus in the brass plate into numerous grains and took a pinch. No point in smothering what you see in your dreams, what you feel and express secretly, but are too scared and embarrassed to accept. Devi flicked a pallu of a saffron sari and carefully took out a crumpled piece of paper. She unraveled it with 2 fingers, trying not to smear it with the grease of the laddu. Nice drawing, she said, scrutinizing the paper. Hey, said Raman, alarmed. Give that to me. He stretched his hands towards Devi, trying to snatch the paper, but failed. Where did you get that? Where you had left it for me, said the Devi. In the depth of the temple well, where you threw it after you had drawn it. Raman blushed red and stepped back. In the corner of the cavern, he could barely bear the gaze of the Devi. Come on, goaded the Devi. There's nothing to be embarrassed, young man. What is wrong to be infatuated by a woman? I'm not infatuated by a woman, growled Raman, clenching his teeth and growing redder still in a curious muddle of embarrassment and fury. Oh no, you are not, said the goddess. You're not infatuated by any woman, are you? She looked again at the figure on the paper. A beautiful woman lounged languidly on a rock beside a river. Her long dark hair fell upon her frame in enchanting swirls, cloaking her body and the rock that she lay upon. Beneath the sparse cover of her luxuriant locks, the woman wore nothing. She was naked, just like the rock she sat upon and the rumbling river which glanced off her feet. She looks just like me, said the Devi. It seems you are in love with me. Her words fell like boulder upon Raman's head. Truth, Raman had learned, was often heavy and cumbersome. What if I am? He shot back. Are you here to punish me for this blasphemy? Devi stood up and brushed the grains of the laddu from a frame. She went to the carved stone figure that was kept behind the divine stones in the shrine and slowly rubbed the grease of the figure. I don't need to visit people personally to punish them, you know. Why are you here then? Asked Raman. Why didn't you manifest yourself to me? That was a question that had been lingering in his mind for a week now. Ever since he had ventured into the sanctum one day, trying to hide from his father, and had found the goddess sitting on the shrine floor, feasting upon the prasad. Devi did not answer. She continued to clean the statue, revealing a carved lotus. She ran her hand upon the stone, and a real lotus appeared in her hand. Gently, she put the lotus in her hair from where the flower peeked bashfully. Many people pray to me, she said, turning to Raman, for things they want, for boons, for divine benevolence, but I seldom have lovers. People who are enamored by me, who dream about me, who drop pictures of me secretly and then throw them down the well. Raman's eyes brightened, and he felt brave enough to emerge from the shadows of the sanctum to meet the gaze of the goddess. It was hard to ignore the warmth which exuded from her eyes and pierced through his countenance. You have no problem with it then? Ventured Raman. The sound of his father blowing the conch suddenly reverberated across the cavern. What would your father think? Asked Devi, when he finds out that his son desires the object of his worship. Raman fidgeted uneasily. I don't care what he thinks, he said, moving closer to Devi. The gaze met, and for a moment Raman felt his face would catch fire. But there was no holding back now. He persevered through the pain, peering straight into those dark, endless eyes. It was Devi's turn to hide from his gaze. She turned abruptly to face the sculpture once more. I think it's time to go, she said without facing Raman and taking a step towards the statue. Wait, said the boy. You said you could read my mind. Devi halted without turning. Then tell me, said Raman, what is in my hand. He raised his clenched fist towards Devi and kept still before turning to face his outstretched hand. She glanced questioningly at his fist. What is it? Raman parted his fingers to reveal a lotus. The same flower that Devi had put in her hair. How did you get that? Smiled Devi, touching her head to verify the missing flower. You play tricks with me. She extended her hand to claim the flower back, but as she touched the pink blossom, There's a queer change in the sanctum. It grew cold, suddenly, and an arcane draft of air blew through the closed cave, ruffling Devi's hair. The lotus shriveled with the touch of the breeze, and transformed quite suddenly. Thorny vines extended between the wilted petals and snaked around the sanctum in maleficent dance before embracing Devi in their unyielding grasp. Devi's eyes glowed red with fury as the vines picked her up and carried her to the altar where she was tied to a stone figurine. The boy observed the sudden turmoil and reticence. Then he stepped closer to the restrained goddess. Ramanendra peered at Devi struggling in the grasp of the vines and grinned like he hadn't for 1,000 years. The Shakti was finally his. It seems, after all, he said with a hint of jubilation in his voice, you weren't as successful in reading my mind as you thought you were. So this is it for me, and now I pass the torch on to Debashri Banerjee to continue the story forward. I hope you liked this part, and I do hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Namaskar. Hello everyone. Friends, it's been a hard time for the world and for us in general. When people tell you to think out of the box while you are boxed up and at home and there is lockdown going on everywhere, it's very difficult to think. But again, that is the challenge. To let your mind wander to places where you physically can no longer go. That is what it is all about. And we, the Right India group, have been trying to achieve just that. When we have been quarantined, when we have been asked not to venture out, we just let our mind venture out. So thank you Harshali and Pranshu for your wonderful story, and now I'm taking it forward from here. So friends, I'm going to read it out for you. Here we go. His eyes shone with eternal malevolence, his voice dark and foreboding. No longer looking anything like the fledgling teenager on the verge of self-discovery, Ramendra's words seemed to cut a chill everywhere they reverberated. They were growls of passion, as if a wild animal had got the very first taste of blood on its lips. Why, Devi? Isn't it unfair for you to be the sole possessor of the supreme power for so long? For eons of eternity? This is unfair. It almost tantalizes me to think of you as a mere woman now, devoid of all your divinity. A woman who claimed to be a mind reader and the source of all action in the entire universe. But a woman, nevertheless, who let down her guard in front of a hapless 17-year-old boy. What a shame! It was a disembodied voice now that seemed to come from nowhere and yet from everywhere, taunting and arrogant. The stern voice of Ramendra's father came in from the distance, carried by the air, made heavy with an ancient maelstrom of energy, just like what happens in the sky during a thunderstorm. He was evidently looking for his son, who had been out of his scrutinizing gaze for too long now. The booming dark voice goaded on. Devi, can you hear my pathetic father? He thinks he can give me one of his stern stares and can scare the hell out of me. Little does he know how close he is to experiencing the real hell himself. And that too, after all these years of incessant mantra chanting and a plethora of rituals he followed. What a mockery of the fragility of human existence. I pity all the fools out there who have invested their lifetimes of faith in you. The voice stopped suddenly, faltering for the first time. The sanctum was empty, completely empty. The vines lay around the altar like vile, slithering serpents, but held nothing in their grasp. Devi was nowhere to be seen. Stop playing games with me, the voice echoed around the sanctum. hitting the stone walls with such fury that the mighty structure trembled with the energy. You know, you cannot evade me now. Come on! A laughter erupted, shaking the very foundations of the temple, bringing down a deluge of stones that broke free after years of adhering with the bigger structure. It was blood-curdling and primordial, guttural and terrifying, and nothing like any human being had ever heard. But at the base of it, it was a woman's laughter. It was a woman's voice this time, trilling one moment with sparks of an unknown energy and somber just the other moment. I thought you heard about the mighty king Ravan of Lanka, such a great and learned scholar, unlike anyone the universe has ever seen, but all the years of tapasya and knowledge couldn't impart that one thing in him. You know what? Wisdom. Knowledge without wisdom is of no meaning, and wisdom asks a seeker to drop the baggage of the cardinal sins or the Shadaripu. Ravan was inebriated with visions of his own supremacy and was immersed in vanity, pride, and arrogance. Call that mud or hubris, whatever you will. With that, Devi reappeared in the sanctum, but not in her saffron robes this time. She was so luminescent that it was difficult to say how she looked or what color she wore. The brightness was blinding that threatened to clear away every nook and corner of the remaining pockets of darkness that refused to go, stubbornly habitual of years of persistence. Do whatever you can, Devi. Your key to divinity is mine now. Don't you dare preach me scriptures. I have already spent thousands of years reading them. Ramendra's voice had lost the edge of certainty now, as perfect darkness swirled around the brilliant light, threatening to engulf it completely. Ramendra! Ramendra! His father's voice kept getting nearer and angrier. The heavy wooden doors guarding the inner sanctum burst open, and the man's voice sounded nearer, almost like it was a part of this frenzy that was unfolding there amid the swirling paraphernalia of colors and sights. And then all the frenzy subsided, leaving the sanctum just like it had been this morning before it all began. Standing at the altar was the old man, clad in his humble dhoti and supplicating before the age-worn stone statuette of Shakti. Om, he chanted. His voice was clear, demure, and all-pervasive, lacking the quality of either of the voices, Devi's or Ramendra's. It was strange because it was devoid of everything. As one listened to it, one wondered whether it was a voice or a sight or a smell or a touch or a taste. Whatever it was, the message was clear. Immanence and transcendence don't get separated. One was nothing without the other. How could Devi be here if I were not? Who would be the actor and who the observer? Didn't you ever ask the very question of the very nature of existence, as inquisitive as you were, or rather as curious and skeptical you have always been, smitten by your inherent nature? You should at least have understood the concept before vying for supremacy. Well, friends, this is where I end my part, and this goes on to another of my fellow Right India winners, Tino Desa, and this was Debashri Banerjee again. Thank you for listening. Stay home, stay safe. Namaskar.
Hello friends, I'm Tino Desa and I've been a Right India winner twice, once in season 2 and once in season 3. This is the fourth part of the story Love of the Deity. I hope you enjoy it. Ramendra froze, barely breathing, and almost as motionless as the idol of Shakti behind which he crouched. His father had chanted just that one word, Om. Yet an avalanche of layered meaning ricocheted off the stone walls of the Garbhagriha. Ramendra's mind was in a frenzy. The calculated calmness and self-assurance with which he had spoken to the goddess seemed to ebb away in the face of the chanting of a simple and largely unlettered man. There was nothing more to be achieved today. Ramendra remained hidden until his father completed the rituals and left the temple for his morning meal, and then stealthily slipped out himself. The next day, Ramendra was once more in the inner sanctum before dawn. The air was thick with a heady mixture of scents: snuffed out joss sticks, burnt sandalwood, pungent camphor, and the overripe smell of decaying flowers. It made him dizzy. In silence, he focused his gaze upon the idol, channeling all his mental energies through that gaze, willing the goddess to manifest herself. Time was no longer of consequence, so he could not tell how much of it had passed. But presently, there was a faint smokiness that emanated from the statue, swirled about and then coalesced into the form of Deity. "So you could not resist me," Ramendra smirked. Her eyes flaming, Devi said, "The gods are not beyond dharma. It is divinity itself that upholds the moral law. Anyone who is willing and able to concentrate enough will be rewarded with a response." Ramendra chuckled. "But I am not just anyone. You must have realized that by now, Devi. Tell me, among all the demons that you fought and thought you'd vanquished, who was the fiercest in battle, and why?" Devi's countenance began to take on a fearsome appearance, terrible and wondrous at the same time. "Mahishasur," she said. It was not so much an answer to the question as a statement of recognition. "Indeed. And why, Devi? Why?" The goddess said nothing. "Let me tell you," said Ramendra. "Because he was a shifter of shapes, a changer of forms. When you struck at the buffalo's hump, he turned into an elephant. When you sliced off its trunk, he turned into a lion, then a bear, then a serpent. A 9-day battle and an apparent victory on the 10th earned you the epithet Mahishasur Mardini, by which you have been worshipped and praised through the ages." Ramendra paused, then continued, a wiliness entering his voice. "But if Mahishasur can turn into an elephant and a bear and a snake, then," here he paused again for effect, "then why not into a young lad? Krishna tells us that whenever there is a decline in dharma, the Lord himself manifests. Know this, Devi, and so do the demons." "You flatter yourself," Ramendra said, Devi coldly. "What my father does day in and day out, the pujas, the rituals, the chanting, is that not flattery too?" Ramendra's voice faltered a bit, but he quickly gained control of himself. A boy, a starry-eyed lad of 17, easy to dismiss. "But I got you, didn't I? All I had to do was to throw a drawing into the temple well, and you could not resist me." "It is not I who flatter myself, Devi. Clearly, even goddesses are subject to flattery. And now that I am here, what do you think you can achieve, Ramendra? That little trick you tried with vines yesterday, you know how that ended?" The sarcasm in Devi's voice had the bite of salt on a fresh wound. Ramendra was nonplussed. He had Devi practically in his grasp. But what should he do now? What could he do now? Like the previous day, his father's approach was heralded by loud chanting, followed soon after by the grumbling of the heavy wooden door as it swung open reluctantly on its rusty iron hinges. Once again, the spell was about to be broken. But Ramendra stood his ground. "Don't leave me, Devi." There was a hint of pleading in his voice. The goddess, who had almost merged into the stone statue of herself, stepped back and turned, a look of infinite tenderness in her eyes. Ramendra's father was shocked to see his son standing before the idol of Shakti, his eyes closed, his face contorted with anguish, his hands moving in gestures as if conversing, yet no sound coming from his lips. The old priest was so perplexed, he hesitated to even touch his son. He stood transfixed, his chanting halted, a mute observer to this strange madness of his boy. The goddess spoke to Ramendra. I will not leave you, Ramendra. I cannot leave you. If you desire me, I am yours. I dwell in you. Dwell in Mahishasur? Ramendra asked incredulously. The goddess laughed gently, with a laughter that had the tinkling of silver bells in it. It is Mahishasur who dwells in you, Ramendra. You are not him, just as you are not me. Mahishasur and I, we battle eternally within your breast. All those doubts that trouble you, those nightmares that torment you, those are our battles. Are you battling now? Asked Ramendra, his voice subdued. Of course we are. What do you think has been happening all this time? She asked rhetorically. And who is winning? Asked Ramendra. That depends, said Devi. Depends on what? Ramendra queried. On you, replied Devi simply. Looking at the puzzlement in Ramendra's face, she explained. You see, it is so much easier to satisfy Mahishasur. He is there to promote all the alluring options in your life, the lazy ones, the negative ones, the doubts, the selfishness, the greed and the desire for instant gratification. With every satisfaction, he grows stronger. Devi smiled and continued. But I am so much harder to please, she said, almost coquettishly. I am picky. I am choosy. I pose challenges. I demand effort and energy and guts. And with your energy, your efforts, and your work, I grow in strength. When I am victorious, the rewards are rich. Rich beyond anything you can imagine. Ramendra looked at Devi with stupefaction. As comprehension dawned, it turned his mind topsy-turvy. Everything he'd thought was not so. Nothing was what it had seemed. With stinging clarity, Ramendra realized that he himself was not what he'd thought he was. The ground seemed to shift from under his feet, and he fell. The old pujari had all this time been watching in bewilderment, too afraid to move, as his son stood with eyes shut, as in a trance, speaking no words, yet his handsome features displaying a whole panoply of expressions. Suddenly Ramendra fell to the ground as though axed. The old man rushed to pick him up, but the boy was too heavy. The father cradled his son's head in his arms, tears streaming from his eyes in helplessness as he tried to revive him. The old priest looked up beseechingly at the idol he had so lovingly bathed and dressed and fed and worshipped 1,000 times. It looked back at him inscrutably with its stone eyes. A faint whiff of lotus blossom wafted from the statue. Strange, thought the old man in the midst of his trepidation. I only ever recall offering hibiscus flowers to the deity. That's it, friends. I do hope you've enjoyed this story. Stay blessed, stay safe. Goodbye.